Good morning. It's July 11th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan, now recently freed from YouTube jail. Oh, it was a terrible sentence. I tell you, some of the things that happened to me, the things I had to do to get cigarettes and such, a shudder to behold. We are free for now. I'm sure we'll probably say something eventually that annoys the YouTube gods, but until then, we'll keep broadcasting there. I still encourage folks to get to Rumble and some of the other platforms to make sure to catch us where we won't be censored as often. I see a commenter, Alberta Free, coming in from YouTube, which I haven't seen those comments coming from there in a little while. He was asking, I did interview Pierre Poilievre. That was actually about an hour and some ago. It's tough with these guys when they're on a campaign trail to get them live. But so I'm afraid the questions you wanted asked, I didn't hit those in that. It was a quick one. It was a good interview. I mean, he was good to talk to, and you'll see. We'll run that a little later in the show. But he didn't get too specific into some of those issues and things like the UN and so on. I just didn't have the time to get into those sorts of things. All right, let's look at our daily observances, things to look into. It's Calgary Stampede, of course. We got our politicians hanging around, shaking hands, kissing asses, doing all that stuff they like doing, pretending to love Albertans. And as well, we have National Mojito Day. So the weather, finally in Alberta, for those of us out here in the West, we have some heat coming, and it's going to get hot out there. This is the day to get your tropical drinks into you, and you've got your excuse. It's Mojito Day. Mix one up, pour it down. I don't drink anymore. When I was a bartender, I used to despise it when people ordered these kinds of things. But if you want to make one for yourself, hey, go to town. It's also National Swimming Pool Day. That's... Again, for those who like swimming pools, hey, good on you. I'm not big on them. I mean, I like swimming in lakes, oceans, and I know technically they're probably dirtier than a lot of pools, but all I think of in swimming pools is kids and elderly people losing bladder control in there, and there's always a Band-Aid floating around, or you see that drain on the side with all the hair all over it. I'm just not big on it. But either way, if you're into pools, hey, go to town, dive on in, have a good time. I'll just enjoy the kiddie pool at my place. So yeah, like I said, I got a couple of good guests today. I got Jay Goldberg is going to come on first. He's with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. They put on some numbers on what is going to be spent on the World Cup events that are being held in Canada. All of you taxpayers, whether you care or don't care about those events, you get to pay for them, and a lot. And let's just block that spammer. Goodbye, Berthier. So yes, blocking isn't censorship, especially if you spam. It just means that you got to find another platform to do that sort of stuff on. Use that comment scroll. I appreciate it. I enjoy it. It keeps things fluid. I like getting the questions from you guys, the comments and discussions, watching those between you guys back and forth and seeing you all checking in from all across the country. It's great. Lets me know I'm not just talking to myself like I do when I'm driving. So yes, the other guest I have second is Pierre Poilievre. He came into the studio, had a chat. We had about 10, 12 minutes there. It was kind of a rush. Things are always in a rush when they're on the campaign road, but at least we had that one-on-one, and we will run that later. It is good and a good watch. Okay, speaking of media, let's talk about the crappy media and what's got me going today. So the bias in Canada's liberal-leaning legacy media outlets it's hardly new or surprising. I mean, what does one expect when the government dangles hundreds of millions of tax dollars in front of them, much like a person holding a piece of bacon to make a dog sit up and beg? The legacy media outlets are in Trudeau boosting overdrive this week, as most of Canada's aspiring politicians do their annual pilgrimage to the Calgary Stampede. It's the one time a year when Albertans can feel loved by their federal political masters. The other 51 weeks, not so much. Now, the Globe and Mail outdid themselves with a headline saying, Trudeau mobbed by admirers at a Stampede pancake breakfast. The image depicted a manically grinning Trudeau gloriously indulging in selfies with fawning admirers at the event. Oh, it was something. Oh, but wait, the Winnipeg Free Press had the exact same headline. So did the Lethbridge Herald. Oh, and CP24, and there were all sorts of others. You can see in that picture that Nico put up there. Yes, there were likely more that we didn't even find, but I think I've made my point. Try to do a little work, you guys. I mean, the reason Trudeau was surrounded by admirers at the event is because it was staged. Nobody aside from a small group directly in touch with his lone member of parliament, George Chahal, even knew he was coming. People were quietly bussed into the event and instructed to crowd around Trudeau for the pictures. Look, I don't fault the Liberal organizers for staging the event. That's the way the game's played. The Stampede is a must-go for politicians, and it doesn't look good if they shun it. And if the event had been publicly announced, Trudeau would have been mobbed by protesters and hecklers. It's Calgary. It's not fertile ground for him. If I was a Liberal strategist, and I don't suspect that's going to ever happen, by the way, I would have done the same thing. It's the weak, complicit mainstream media I'm revolted with. They used the CP story and didn't even bother to change the headline. It's cut and paste journalism, and it indicates two things. One is laziness on the part of the legacy media outlets and their efforts to endear themselves to the Liberal Party of Canada. Only one or two reporters were tipped off to attend the event, of course. They were clearly Liberal-friendly ones. They wanted to keep the news of the event tight. Where were the other legacy reporters anyway? Well, they came out to the Conservative Party barbecue in droves. The headlines were rather different, though. I mean, look at this gem from the CBC. How a Conservative Party barbecue became Pierre Poilievre's red meat cookout. The piece then reported on pins being handed out. And one said, hands off my six-shooter, or another one said, more Alberta, less Ottawa. And of course, it was reported by Mr. Markusoff in hushed tones on all hat, no cattle, or buck off Trudeau was even seen there. It was noted that Charest got a few boos as well, and pretty much went on to imply it was a redneck gathering of borderline extreme Poilievre supporters. Quite a difference in coverage from one event to another, isn't it? This kind of reporting has gone on for years, and it works. It's little wonder the Liberals keep spending more and more tax dollars fostering it. Does anybody remember the beauty in 2016? That was just awesome. When the Trudeau Liberals staged an event in front of a chalkboard covered with random formulas, and Trudeau then recited a carefully rehearsed statement on quantum computing to a room of cheering, giggling supporters. I'm surprised they didn't give him some glasses with a little tape on the bridge of it to make him look a little more like a classic bookworm. The event was cheesy enough to warrant it. The Liberals were trying to knock down the growing impression among Canadians that Trudeau is a moron. And again, they can't be blamed for working to convince Trudeau is a cerebral sort of guy, though. I mean, it's a monumental task. It failed, and the Liberals went back to showing pictures of Trudeau shirtless or impulsively crashing weddings. Again, though, it wasn't the Liberal actions that were galling. It's how the mainstream media obliges them. Information is everything, and the authoritarian Trudeau government wants to control it. Bills C-11 and C-18 are testaments to that. The purchase of the Canadian Media Corps, though, is the most repugnant of their actions. Legacy media outlets dance like trained monkeys to a government organ grinder. It must be humiliating to journalists who entered the trade with dreams of doing investigative and critical, unbiased reporting. Alternative outlets like ours are filling the void. I believe in the long run, free media is going to win, even though they might need to go nearly underground at some point. It may be a tougher ride for independent media outlets like us who refuse tax funding, but it's much more satisfying and we can hold our heads high. Legacy media, they continue to embarrass themselves further with every Liberal puff piece. All right, that's what I've got to get myself going this morning. Let's talk to somebody who is a principal news media personality, and that's Mr. Dave Naylor, our news editor, and see what else is going on out there today. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
I have no personality, Cory. Come on.
I tried.
Hey, I'm still waiting for my invite to the Trudeau barbecue, and I don't think anybody at the Western Standard got an invite. So
they must have mistyped your email address or something.
Exactly. Well, on the other side, we had Pierre Poilievre in the office to talk to you, and he created a bit of a stir, and he was fun to talk to. Turns out 35 years ago, I was working for the Calgary Sun, and he was a paper boy for the Sun. So we were talking about that. So we've gone from me making the news and him delivering it to him making the news and me delivering it. It's kind of a nice segue in life, I guess.
Yes, well, we evolve.
Yeah, so on the site today, we've got a very interesting story from our Melanie Risdon. It was announced recently that the leading cause of death in Alberta was unexplained deaths. And so Melanie has taken a deep dive into that and has talked to doctors and lawyers and just to see what exactly was going on. And, the fact that all these unexplained deaths started at the beginning of the COVID vaccinations, but government still doesn't want to look into that particular angle. Jason Kenney, Alberta Premier, celebrated his last one as Premier today with his annual Stampede breakfast. In between flipping pancakes, he announced a new commemorative date. From now on, every September 1st will be Alberta Day. And unfortunately, from what I understand, it's not going to be an extra holiday. So you're not going to have a super duper Labor Day long weekend, but it's just to mark the province and its history. Our Dave Marsden's written a column on Lake Sukhumi, always a fun place to go with the kids in the summer. But the NDP, if you remember, brought in an admission of $5 a piece, $5 a person. And Mr. Marsden is arguing that should be removed and points out the NDP hypocrisy in opposing the user fees for Kananaskis country that the UCP brought in. Got a couple of drowning tragedies to report on this morning, Cory. It looks like 3 people have died in a accident on lake in the Spray Lakes area near Canmore. Boat overturned. 1 person was able to make it to safety. 1 was recovered deceased, and 2 are still missing. And if you remember that young Saskatchewan boy, Frank Young, who a month or so ago disappeared, and there was a massive search. His body was found on the weekend. Sad ending to that story. So the best story of the day coming up shortly, Cory. It's the naked news, literally. Cell phone coverage of a guy streaking through downtown St. Albert and being chased by the RCMP. So that's kind of fun. That'll be up within minutes.
Yeah, just to point out, I can see him back there still busily working behind you. I think Rob worked very diligently to make sure that nobody has any glimpses of that fella's dong as he's running by, right?
Rob has been dong invested all morning. He's looked at it, stared at it for hours.
Well, he's going to have dong on the mind for quite some time after this, I'm sure. All right. Well, thanks for the updates, Dave. Looking forward to that story being posted.
Thanks, Cory.
Thanks. So there we go. That's our news editor, Dave Naylor. And as we can see, yes, it's tongue-in-cheek, but we cover some, there's some pretty serious and tragic stories, unfortunately, out there today, too. But we can also, laugh and live a little bit and do what we can out there. It's a lot up there on the news copy. It was tragic with the Frank Young. He was that young boy. It's just awful to see that picture, and they found his body. He didn't make it. And likewise, lots of other things on the break. But yeah, some weirdo running around with his wiener out in St. Albert has made some news as well. We got that video up there. Just to get to some of the questions too from others then. MEC, I see saying, why didn't Pierre attend the debate or do scrums at the last debate? It's hard. It's easy. He's playing to win. He's playing the political strategy game. That's the way it works. It's nothing new. It's sort of when you're the perceived front runner, at least, you feel that you shouldn't get into those events because you won't gain anything, but you might get in trouble. I don't like seeing it. I understand why they do it. I'm not big on it. I didn't grill him much on it. Part of it in reality, too, is I only had 10 minutes. I wanted to get some questions in. And I won't be a suck-up to politicians, but at the same time, I'm not really going to attack and hit hard on them, at least not at this point. As I said in the interview, and you'll see, I do make a promise to get on his case later if the opportunity presents. I see Angel saying, oh, wow, you lost your home to a tornado and you're in an Airbnb. Well, that's awful. I hope everything comes together for you. Yeah, there were some tornadoes last week. We're getting some serious weather going on out there, and some people lost their homes. That's awful to hear. I hope we can distract you with the show for a little bit today. Anyways, thanks for tuning in from the B&B. I hope it's a nice one, and that aid and insurance and everything comes through as quickly as possible. I'm not a big fan of insurance companies myself. Excuse me. All right, so let's see. Justin. Yeah. Carrie Lynn Olford saying, with Trudeau's event in Calgary, there was one lone heckler saying something about traitor or something from the background. He must have gotten word and sped out to that event fast. Excuse me. Well, he could. But it's just funny to watch those stage things. There's I don't remember the new name of it. There's a Trudeau troll account, I guess you can almost say, or parody account out there that's Justin Trudeau's ego or something like that on Twitter. And I tell you what, it's a hard one to tell when they're making joke tweets or real ones, and he's had a really good time with this stuff going on with Trudeau with his whirlwind visit in and out of Calgary. Let's see, what else have we got here going on? I'm just checking the comments. And, another sad story. That was the Spray Lakes incident. Just that reminder, I guess, everybody, I grew up in Banff. We used to see that every year, with the tourists. We used to refer to them as Gorbies back in the 80s and 70s. I don't know where it originated, but that was the semi-derogatory term for them. We knew that our bread and butter was on the tourism industry and we valued people coming out. But the saying we'd also say is when people go on vacation, they leave their brains behind. So it sounds like in the Spray Lakes, some people were out in a boat. I don't think they had life jackets. if you know Spray Lakes, it's straight south of Canmore. It's in some high mountain country. It's actually where that film The Edge was done, where they crashed the plane in the water. If you've dealt with mountain water, it is cold. You cannot sustain yourself more than a few minutes in it before you're getting hypothermia, even in the middle of summer. These people were obviously poorly prepared, and a person died. I just, that reminder, people, as I said, in Banff and that, they forget how real things are. It's just like you see the idiots walking up to bears or elk or things like that. They're on vacation. They think that these things are harmless or benign or safe. And hey, they really are wild animals. And when you're in the mountains, you really are in the mountains. Those lakes are dangerous. The Spray Lakes get wind gusts like you wouldn't believe. And as I said, that water is cold. Minnewanka, same thing in Banff. There's a reason there's not beaches and swimming there, because it is ice cold. It's beautiful to look at, but you don't want to dip into that. In Cascade, you used to see the people constantly. They walk up that waterfall. You see it off the highway. They'd hike up it. Really easy to go up that thing. And then they freeze when they look down and realize how high they got. And we got to spend all the money and time to send somebody up and rescue them. That would happen practically weekly up there. So going out this summer, just be careful. Don't make foolish mistakes. And hey, everybody's capable of just having a brain fart, but it can have the worst possible outcomes in the mountains. And even as a guy who grew up out in the mountains, one day maybe I'll spare you today, but I'll relate the Assiniboine story that my father started with a whole big family hiking trip with a bunch of us and led to a very embarrassing rescue down the road. So no, I'm not above and beyond, nor is my family, making foolish errors causing rescues. Yeah, I'll share that one of these days. Still got to chew on that. It's a bit embarrassing, even if it's been 30 years and more. So let me see what else we got in the news. Oh, and this is the time to remind people too that, yes, the reason we got this news, the reason we're not like that wretched mainstream media is because of the members. That's the reason it showed with all those stories, like I was talking about in that rant, that a lot of these media outlets, they're beholden to the Liberal government. They don't want to shake the tree. They don't want to cause any disturbance. Well, why? It's because it's been, they're reliant on those tax dollars. They're reliant on those subsidies. Even if it's unconscious, you can't help yourself. You don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. In our case, we're beholden to the members. We're beholden to you guys who have subscribed, and you've done it in droves. That's why we've got this growing operation up here, a number of reporters, people all across the country, this great studio that we're expanding in, and getting technically better all the time. So if you haven't subscribed already, I just want to thank the subscribers who have already done so. And if you haven't, come on, guys, $10 a month, $99 a year. That keeps us independent from the government. We will not take tax dollars ever. Not while I'm here anyways. And I'm pretty sure Derek's pretty solid on that. Take out a membership, though. We're not asking for charity. We're selling a service, and you'll find it well worth it. Look at all the stories Dave was talking about. We got lots going on. Let's see, AB Free saying, bring bear spray if you're heading out in the trails. It could be the only thing that gives people a chance to survive. Yeah, I worked in seismic survey for decades. I did a lot of heli-portable work, a lot of mountain work. We ran across bears. Thankfully, I never had a violent encounter with any. I often had firearms, but all the same, I never shot at a bear, which is good. They're good to scare them off. But you want to prevent. And bear spray, hey, it's not a guarantee of saving your butt, but it beats the hell out of nothing. And a bear with a face full of that might be just that thing to make it decide, you're more trouble than you're worth, and go the other way. It's just a horrible way to think of getting taken out by a bear. I don't like it. So let's see what else we've got. I'm actually going to move on to our guest, if I think that's him. I see in the lobby there, Mr. Goldberg. Yes. So I got Jay Goldberg of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's going to come on, and we're going to talk about the World Cup and a whole hell of a lot of your tax dollars going towards it. So thanks for joining me today, Jay.
Great to be with you.
So, just kind of lay it out. I saw your release last week. That's why I wanted to get you on. We've got these events going on around the country, and it's quite a cost going on here.
Well, I would ask your viewers and yourself if there's anything that you think is worth $644,000 a minute. And our politicians sure think there is, and that would be hosting World Cup games. So Canada has been nominated to host 10 of the World Cup games in 2026. We're doing that alongside the United States and Mexico. So we're only hosting 17% of the games. We don't know which teams are going to be here, but the cost is going to be $600 million simply to host 10 games. And so politicians are looking to soak taxpayers in Vancouver and Toronto, but also all throughout the country, because the federal government is throwing $200 million into this. So we're spending over $500 million to host just 10 World Cup games. And as I said, it's going to cost us taxpayers $644,000 a minute.
And that's just what the governments are pouring in. So that doesn't cover if you actually were really into this and wanted to buy gate admission and take in a game, you still got to pay out of pocket for that too, right?
That's exactly right. And you know what? FIFA's taking all of the revenue from ticket sales. So the government's not going to make up any money that way either. Toronto's done an analysis. They're claiming that it's only going to cost only $290 million for taxpayers. Well, first of all, that's a heck of a lot of money. But second of all, these things always go over cost. Vancouver Olympics, 17% over cost. Calgary Olympics, 59% over cost. So we're looking at cost overruns here, and it's very likely that it's not going to be $600 million. It's going to be closer to $1 billion or more. And taxpayers in Alberta and everywhere else will be paying for 5 games to be played in Toronto, 5 in Vancouver. That's not worth $600 million or more.
No, I mean, it just gets so frustrating. So, and I mean, so few people are going to enjoy it as well. I mean, how on earth, though, do these costs run so high? I mean, what is it with these? Even NFL games don't run that much for a number of games.
No, that's exactly right. And so part of it has to do with the government has to directly give money to FIFA for the privilege of hosting this. They also have to upgrade the field downtown, Montreal, Bank of Montreal field in Toronto. There's some upgrades that have to happen in Vancouver. But a lot of it is just giving money to FIFA for the honor of being able to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for these games. And, you know, we're not talking about hosting the entire World Cup games. We're talking about upgrading a stadium in Toronto for the sake of just 5 games. And we don't know which countries are going to be involved. We don't know how many people are going to show out to those games. But we're going to shell out all that money for the sake of 5 World Cup games here in Toronto.
Well, I'll play a little devil's advocate because I know that's what they like to do with this. They say that's the term they like using. You know, we're not allowed to use that when we write, and I agree with it. It's an investment of tax dollars, right? We're investing. We're going to build up Canada's profile on the world stage, and it'll pay off for us through tourism and investment later, right?
Well, you know what? And I was debating a Toronto City Councillor on the radio. That's the exact argument he used, and it was the only one they had because Toronto City Council is estimating revenue for businesses, so not the government, but businesses, they're projecting could be $307 million. They're also saying the cost of Toronto taxpayers will be $290 million. So even the city council is saying potential upside is just $17 million. And if you go 6% over budget, that's a loss. And remember, this money that's potentially being made by businesses, it's not tax revenue going back to the government. This is just businesses here. And so basically, people from all around the country will be engaging in corporate welfare, subsidizing businesses in Toronto. And when you talk about prestige, you know, I don't know that Sochi is all that much more on the map from hosting the Olympics. I don't know that China got all that much out of it. I don't know that Vancouver got all that much out of it. And frankly, just for some kind of prestige around the world, I think there's a lot more that we could be known for than hosting a mere 5 games in a couple of cities.
Well, and when it comes to sporting and entertainment events and things, it gets frustrating too when they talk about how much that brings to local businesses. I mean, the people attending these events and paying ticket fees or going to them tend to predominantly be local people anyways. So these are dollars. It's not like they're, oh, sorry, the soccer's not on. I'm just going to take it and throw it in the fireplace. I mean, this is disposable income that people are using. It's not newly generated income. They're just spreading it in a different way. If this event didn't happen, they'd go to a movie or they'd go out for supper or they'd upgrade their patio or something.
That's exactly right. So it's going to be taken out of the economy in other ways. I highly doubt that there's going to be all that many people that are going to say, I want to go to Toronto just to see 5 World Cup games. And they could be, you know, any country that's included. It could be something that's not at all interesting to us. We know that the big matches are going to be played in cities all across the United States. You know, and I should say there's nothing wrong with us hosting some, you know, soccer games or football games, as many would call it. But as long as taxpayer money is not involved, if they want to figure out a way to make this work without us having to hand out hundreds of millions of dollars, more power to them. But there's no reason why taxpayers should be stuck with the bill.
Oh, and such a staggering number. I mean, that's just nuts. You know, these are events that people are willing to pay a lot of money for a ticket seat to attend. These are events that the advertisers would definitely like to spend a lot of money to get their branding out there and advertise during the games. there's just no reason these things shouldn't be profitable if they were just allowed to go that route.
That's exactly right. All the money that's being thrown around, whether it's to FIFA or whether it's to others, and taxpayers in Toronto are shelling out over $90 million, as I said, combined across the country, $600 million. And, we really have to think about anyone who's not living in Toronto, Vancouver. And, you were saying that it's mostly going to be local people supporting local businesses. You're right, but even the government's argument that this is going to be great for business, why should anyone outside of the GTA or outside the Vancouver general area have to put their hard-earned tax dollars into trying to help businesses in these big cities, potentially thousands of kilometers away, do well? I think people would rather have money in their pockets through fewer taxes so that they can go to their local restaurants and local bars all across the country and support local businesses that way instead of, subsidizing money for the big cities.
Yeah, and the two big cities too that already have the highest cost of living in the country, and bringing in events like that actually are only going to crowd things more and bring those costs up. I mean, again, I wouldn't want to see tax funding go to any of these, but if you really want to have a benefit, upgrade and bring them out to Regina and to the stadium out there or some of these other spots. I imagine though it's FIFA that makes those calls, not the government.
It is FIFA, but here in Toronto, like elsewhere in the country, we don't have a stadium where you can play soccer that's big enough. And so BMO Field downtown, where Toronto taxpayers are going to pay tens of millions of dollars to add some extra seats there. And again, we're doing it for 5 games. So the cost of each seat, who knows how many $1 million each seat is going to cost, just so we can add these seats for 5 games. And then there's seats that we didn't happen to need before because we don't have the kind of turnout for other games that are played there when it's not the World Cup. So this is it's a colossal waste of taxpayer dollars. Again, it's great to host the World Cup. It could be great to have it here in Canada. There's no reason it should cost taxpayers across the country so much money, over $500 million to do this. It's a boondoggle, and we got to pull the plug.
Well, as you said a couple of times, we don't know who's actually going to be playing. So, I mean, if you've got a couple of dogs playing and it's not really a popular match, you might end up with a stadium that's only a quarter full, and you're really going to take a bath on this.
Well, that's the thing. How many people are going to want to fly all the way to Toronto to see some games of, countries playing that they're not that interested in? If the major countries that people want to see at the World Cup, if they're not playing here in Canada, and probably they won't be because we're only hosting a small fraction of the games, then, the odds that you're going to fill the stands are actually quite low. And so, again, we're literally going to be renovating BMO Field, spending tens of millions of dollars to expand it, and we may very well not even need to be expanding it. So it's yet another waste of taxpayers' dollars, and all it means is higher taxes. Cities cannot run deficits. The city of Toronto has to balance its budget, so it's going to raise property taxes to pay for its share. Then the feds and the province are going to throw money in, but again, $200 million from the federal government, so taxpayers all across the country can support this boondoggle in Toronto and Vancouver. It doesn't make sense. Government's got to get out of this business. There's no way we should be subsidizing something like that. Welcome the games to Canada, but get government money out.
Yeah, so is there time to do anything about this yet, though, or is this a done deal?
No, there's still time. These cities have been nominated, but the city of Toronto, for example, city council hasn't yet voted on whether to approve the money. They've agreed to it in principle, but they haven't voted. And so what's going to be absolutely essential is for Canadians to reach out and be very clear to our governments, particularly in Toronto and Vancouver. But I would encourage people from all around the country to reach out to councillors and mayors in Toronto and Vancouver and to forget about this. We don't want to waste their tax dollars on it. And you should say, no thank you, take a pass, and let's let Mexico and the United States host all the games.
Great. Well, it's quite something. I'm glad you're bringing it to the forefront, though. I mean, being such a big event with so much money, surprisingly, I haven't heard a heck of a lot about it, actually. So we're having some sound issues coming from your end. It's a buzzing or a feedback or something. So I think we've kind of covered it, though. I'll let you go. But where else can we find more information on the Taxpayers Federation and what you're doing, Jay?
Yeah, you can go to taxpayer.com. You can find everything there, including our news release and the newspaper article that was on this, that was in the paper.
Excellent. Yes, and it was a good release. So just to remind everybody, go to taxpayer.com. And again, if you guys, pat on the back. If you weren't bringing it up, I wouldn't even have heard about it. I don't pay attention to World Cup stuff, but we got to know what we're getting stuck paying for. So I appreciate that and appreciate you coming on and talk to us about it today, Jay.
You bet. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Talk again soon. Okay, so yes, that was Jay Goldberg of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Yeah, I see that from a number of you commenting. I'm hearing it too. I'm not sure. There was something with a connection issue on Jay's end. So a bit of an annoying buzzing, but all the same, I'm sure you got the basics and most of what Mr. Goldberg was going on about. And that was, think about that. 5 games in each venue, 10 games, 600 million tax dollars. And as he said, these things always go over budget. And who cares? I know there's some football fans out there, and we're not talking about the good football like my Steelers. We're talking about that old kicking that soccer ball around, as we should say it around here. And some people would really enjoy it. But again, if there's not the market for people to pay for it themselves, get out of it. And I mean, in Calgary, we've been in the throes of this battle over building an arena out here, a deal that Jody Gondek cratered and torpedoed when she came in as mayor. And that, I think, was a $500 million deal. I could be corrected on that one, which was still too much. But this is $600 million for 10 games in 2 cities of your money. A lot of us are struggling to make the bills. Inflation's going rampant. Looks like, the recession word, economists are finally starting to use it because, again, the government's in its usual rock and a hard place. Inflation is running rampant. People are getting ticked off. People are getting pressured. People are in trouble. The main tool the government has to fight inflation is the Bank of Canada cranking up interest rates. When they raise the interest rates, it slows the economy, but that hurts. It means that you can't afford to borrow. People aren't going to be buying houses as much, or vehicles, or businesses might not be doing capital expansion because they got to pay more for the interest on the loans and the financing to do it, but it'll slow the inflation. But if you use that tool, it's a hammer, and you got to be careful with it. And if you push too hard, you drive people into recession. We know this. We've seen this. This is history that keeps repeating itself in the developed world, basically. I mean, we love joking about how Trudeau has utterly no understanding of economics, and his supporters and socialists in general. Yet those people with no sense of economics keep getting into power. As Saniko saying, how about government stops printing money like it's going out of style? Yep. That's the other thing. See, as I said, the interest rates in the Bank of Canada is one way they can push downward against inflation. The other way that they won't do, and they won't talk about, is cut the bloody spending. Quit borrowing and quit printing more money. Cut it out. But they won't do it. They won't even discuss it. So, and it's not like we could pretend we have no room to cut. You're spending $600 million on a friggin' soccer game. You have money to cut. We're spending $1.5 billion for the CBC to put out shit. We have money to cut. We don't have an excuse for this inflation. But we got to grow some cojones as Canadians. We got to push back. Part of the reason is, I've talked about that before too. The reason people vote these guys in over and over and over again is because we seem to be inclined to vote for whoever blows the most sunshine up our butts. And we don't want to hear about cuts. I want, it's the left. It's mostly central Canada, of course, but it's the gimme, 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 gimme. It's all free. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Keep spending. Keep spending. Keep spending. It'll make us all rich. No, it won't. You're borrowing on the backs of our grandchildren is what you're doing. And we're all getting poorer for it. And inflation is wiping out any of the benefits you see in the short term from this sort of government opening of the floodgates of spending. And it just gets so maddening. I mean, it's one thing when people get upset if we're talking about cutting healthcare or cutting education, those core services that most people agree they want government in, which I still don't think the government should be in as much anyways. But we're paying $600 million for soccer while everybody's in this much trouble? This is absurd. And I mean, that's why I thank so much Jay, sound challenges or not, for bringing it up, because where are we hearing about this? How much is the mainstream media talking about this? Why aren't they questioning this? There's this ridiculousness. As we said, I mean, these stadiums, what are they going to fit in there? 80,000, 90,000 people paying how much for tickets, plus all the advertising revenue, all of that, yet still the government's pouring $600 million into it. Man, no wonder we're going broke. Meanwhile, speaking of banking, let's get into some other news. The convoy bank freeze. We're getting some news. Again, as I've talked about before, the committees, the government areas that they're asking and they're testing and they're checking because the government's trying to make his excuses as to why they brought in martial law against citizens who had bouncy castles last February, and it's falling apart. And so the privacy commissioner is now being asked to determine if the convoy bank freeze complied with an act of parliament. So this is from a conservative MP. Institutions received no instruction on how to properly store, keep, or use the data received from the RCMP. Like, it was a gong show and very arbitrary. So they were throwing things out, basically pressuring these somewhat private institutions, banks, and saying, freeze these accounts here, here, and here. And are we supposed to believe they got it right? Are they supposed to believe they secured the information well enough? So at least we got some questioning on it. Whether we got good answers or not, I don't know. Saying, what was the information shared to the receiving institutions? Name, address, date, birth, social insurance number. Because they had to send all that to these banks to search out these people so that they could crack down on them. And when our information gets sent, we get made vulnerable. Speaking of vulnerable, how did everybody enjoy that Rogers breakdown last week? Hey, everybody who had Rogers services of any kind, you were screwed, weren't you, when that crashed? And if you used debit for anything, you were hooped. The cost of that outage of 2 days from one service provider is going to be staggering when it's fully calculated. I was reading an article about some people, they were sitting in restaurants, but they had no way to pay. They had no credit cards. All they had was debit. They didn't have cash on them. They walked out. I don't know. What are you supposed to do? Hold them hostage? But they don't have a means to pay. It wasn't their fault. But then I saw this ding dong, and there's a lot of them, on Twitter, a doctor saying, this is an indication of why, how did he put it? Just, how vulnerable we are and why government should be controlling things, just like healthcare. Basically saying government should come in. What? No, it's the opposite. What it indicated is what happens and how badly screwed as a consumer you get when there's a monopoly or a near monopoly in any kind of services. If there had been 50 different phone service provider companies out there, digital service provider companies out there, there would have been alternatives. There would have been options. It would have been one provider bringing the entire country to its knees when something crashes. And to hear this hammerhead saying, this is the reason we got to keep government with a healthcare monopoly. No, it's the exact reason opposite. This is why we got to get out of the healthcare monopoly. There's only one health provider in Canada, and it's the bloody government. And they do it terribly. They can't even renew our passports. Yet you want to have them have the sole exclusive authority over providing health care to you. No wonder they do it so poorly. Think about it. You need multiple options. You need competition. You need these things to spur things along. As you see the article that Miko pulled up, Liberals are now mulling an online passport renewal process. Online. We're spending money paying huge salaries with huge pensions and all of these benefits to these civil servants all the way across the country. Again, speaking of our tax dollars, we're talking about something as simple as renewing a passport. It's pretty basic, guys. It's a document. It's one that, you need some checks and balances and controls, and you have it printed and you send it to a person. If these guys can't get it together, they're incompetent. Outsource that. And yes, carefully. The problem is they outsource it, and then our personal information goes to some sole-sourced liberal buddy out there. And it's just the state. And people want more state. I don't get it. How can you look at these things and say, I want the government to control more stuff? I want them to have more monopolies. Are you insane? Well, I think some people are. Let's see. Somebody's saying, I want to donate to, where were we? Cian Bexty for his Dutch Farmer News, but will my funds be frozen? What about my Western Standard subscription? I think the bank freezes are done for now. So I'm pretty sure nobody's had their funds frozen for subscribing to the Standard. And I'm pretty sure for people who donated to Cian, they haven't as well. And whatever he's doing over there, at least he's covering it. Whatever people might think of Cian Bexty or not, that's another issue that's been interesting. And speaking of censorship, I mean, the mainstream media does not like touching that Dutch farmer uprising to save their lives. And it's huge. It's huge. We got the Dutch. They got tractors all over the place. They're ramming blockades. They're blocking cities. They're spraying police officers with mulch. We put up some of our small rants and things like that. We throw it on TikTok, and they just gets more rants and news and things like that out to different people, different faces. It's all good for social media. And typically when I throw one of those out there, we've only been on TikTok for a month and some, I think. But I mean, it's gone really well. One of my rants would go anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 people would watch it. Great. It's reaching more people. Except the one I did last Thursday on the Dutch farm uprising. That one got 24 views, I think, the last time I checked. Every other one gets, again, 6,000 to 10,000. This one got 24. As people remind, that TikTok is owned by the Chinese. And, while TikTok doesn't necessarily censor in some areas, they do in others. One thing the Chinese are typically not fond of is anywhere where the citizens stand up and stand up for themselves and push back. So, I mean, there's no coincidence. There's no doubt about it. For whatever reason, the algorithms of that are set to make sure that as little stuff as possible about that Dutch uprising gets out there. And again, it all comes down to the more the better. We don't want monopolies. We don't want control. We got kicked off of YouTube for 2 weeks. Again, and that was the second strike for us. If somehow we annoy their algorithms again, we might get kicked off permanently with YouTube. So I do encourage people to get to Rumble and that, at least as an alternative. I saw some of that discussion from some of you saying, why are you on YouTube still, when they're so censorous? The problem is YouTube has a better format for the commenting, and I can see those more easily. Rumble, I do see the comments, but I got to open. It's a separate thing. It doesn't integrate into this. I hope it comes along and gets better. But still, you can catch the shows, you can see the stuff. So hedge your bets, get out there, subscribe on Rumble, get onto those things. We don't know the next time we'll get canceled or shut down. And likewise, TikTok, all of those. If we want it to get better, there's only one way, and that is by having more service providers. And then we're not controlled by just a handful. As long as we allow just a handful of giants to control us, then we are in a lot of trouble. Let's see here. Some more news here. No mask, no pay, says judge. Yeah, this one was interesting. Loblaw. So a guy got suspended without pay for refusing to wear a mask back during the masking times. And he tried going to court, and the judge said, no, the employer has the right to force you to wear a mask, and you're out of luck. So, some court rulings have been promising, some have not. And in this case, this guy, he's out of luck. He's going to have to find work somewhere else and whatnot. The ability and right not to wear a mask is protected, but, not protected. It's a hard one. I believe in a private business's right if they feel, and I know that people can debate and argue about it, that's fine, if they feel it's providing a health benefit to bring in some rules. When I worked in the food service industry, I tell you what, I hated wearing a hairnet with everything I'm worth. I couldn't stand it. It sticks on your head, it messes your hair. Not my hair's all that beautiful to behold. Anyways, couldn't stand them. But if I refused to wear a hairnet when I was in food service, in my case, I owned the bar. I could refuse. I wouldn't get fired. But if the health inspector caught me, we could be in some trouble. And I don't think it's an unreasonable regulation. Nobody wants a hair in their burger. But at the same time, it should be my choice then to say, well, if I don't want to wear that hairnet, then I just better work somewhere else. And, if I fired a cook because they weren't wearing a hairnet and were making, hairballs in the omelets, I think I'd be within my rights to do so. Now, I know masks, they don't provide much benefit whatsoever, if any, but I somewhat respect the business's right to bring in those rules on their part. It's a complicated area. It really is. Let's see. Foreign masseuses were okay. This is an interesting one. The Department of Employment, and I'll get to the Poilievre interview after this rant on this one. The Department of Employment granted dozens of permits to foreign massage therapists working as migrant labor in Canada, but then they didn't check further with the employers. People have been watching human trafficking and the issues going on. There's some horrible stuff happening. And, immigrants are brought in and they're heavily, heavily indebted to some sort of odious organization that will streamline them. They'll do the work to get them here, but they come here, they're broke, they're dependent, and they stick them into rub and tugs. Come on, drive down the street in any bad part of town. You see all those open signs on massage places and seedy areas at 10 at night. I can't imagine there's really that many people that have sore backs that time of night that need therapy. We know where they are. We know what they are. And those places get busted all the time for human trafficking and borderline slavery. And on top of it all, the Department of Employment seems to be welcoming it. I mean, again, I welcome immigration, bringing in people, to fill employment voids and things like that. But we got to watch some of these hot button areas. And if you're going to bring in people, were we short of massage therapists? Was there a shortage? Was there a crisis with them? And why didn't you follow up? But they didn't. So yeah, they brought these workers in and dumped them into these rub and tugs. Jack Layton would be proud, but we're having government facilitating these trades. I mean, we can use all sorts of workers out here, but these other areas we don't need them. I mean, there's actually rules against bringing in strippers and outright escort services and things like that, because again, they know it turns into this. Well, we know bloody well that those massage dens are hotbeds of this sort of thing, but our government's facilitating it. Again, maybe there's some people in government who just enjoy those services and want to see them broadened. But these are serious stories, and again, it's government at its best as usual. But we keep reporting on it while we can. Yeah, somebody was saying, cooks, don't they wear those little hats and things like that? Yeah, there's variable. It depends on the rules of the house and things like that, or commercial bakeries and that they'll wear hairnets. Some will just wear hats. It depends on the rules of each place, whether there's problems. Again, I just feel more like leaving it to businesses. So I'm going to talk about one of our sponsors quickly, and then we'll get to the Pierre Poilievre interview we'll run. And that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of capitalism, speaking of letting businesses do their things, aside from you guys who have been subscribing, which I greatly appreciate, we also run on advertising. And hey, if you got a product or service, send me an email. Let's see, we can, we got a good audience out here, good conservatives. We can spread your message. Let's talk. Aside from that, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, not only have they been a great sponsor, they are a great group. It's easy to talk about them and plug them because they are doing work that needs to be done. We also, with this government, this authoritarian government, they're coming for your firearms. They're coming for your property. And you got to push back. If we don't push back, you don't stand up for yourself, you're going to lose. This is how you do it. Safety in numbers, guys. You got to join the association. You got to get together. Plus, there's resources, all sorts of things for safe, fun firearm use. I mean, it's a great pastime for a lot of people. Check them out. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association, they're standing up for you. They've got court challenges on your behalf. And a membership is really not terribly expensive. It's a, let's use the government terms, it's an investment in yourself. Their website is cssa-cila.org. All right. So as I said, Pierre Poilievre, it was about, maybe almost 2 hours ago now. He came into the studio here in the Western Standard, and we had time for a quick 10-minute chat. So we covered a number of the issues and such. I'm going to run that interview, and we'll talk a little more after that's through. Well, Mr. Poilievre, welcome to the Western Standard Studio, and thank you very much for making some time to come down here from your Stampede rounds. I know you've been running hard and popping up all over, so I appreciate it, and welcome.
Great to be with you.
So we'll get straight to it. This is the Western Standard. You're in the West. You're at the Stampede. I'm stuck by a dress code. I have to wear this thing, but you can wear the Stampede wear I see. I want to start with that, the Western issues. I'm sure you've been hearing that the last few days. The alienation, Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan. Secessionism is at all-time highs, and that would be, I would like to think, one of your prime tasks as a prime minister. How do you unify this country?
Well, we have to put an end to the pay up and shut up attitude Ottawa has had to Western Canada for far too long. We need to treat the Alberta and the West as full partners and give Albertans the same rights and freedoms within Confederation as every other province has. And that includes allowing the development of our clean and responsible energy sector here. As you know, we have the most ethical energy production on planet Earth. The International Energy Agency says that for the next 20 years, that the world will be consuming 60 million barrels of oil at least every single day. And I think it's best for that oil, or largest part of it, to come from democracies that protect their environments and their people. And there's no one that does that better than Albertans and Saskatchewanians. So I'll be repealing C-69, C-48, and removing the carbon tax to allow for our sector to succeed. And while incentivizing continued environmental advances that the sector has been making over the last decades. So I think if you give Albertans the freedom to produce incomes for themselves and for the country, get the gatekeepers in Ottawa out of the way, then we will be able to produce not only bigger, more powerful paychecks, inflation-proof paychecks for Western Canadians, but it will unify the country.
So getting product east, of course, would really make a great deal in energy
Yeah.
security for us right now. We just don't have a decent pipeline getting out there. And Energy East died on the vine. It was regulated to death. But another hindrance there was, I mean, Quebec was making very strong signals that we're just not going to let that thing cross our territory. You'd have a tough juggling act. I mean, do you respect provincial autonomy, or do you enforce that it is federal authority saying an interprovincial pipeline has to go? Where would you work with?
Well, first of all, I've stated in Quebec, as I state everywhere, that I believe that that Energy East was good for Canada, for all of Canada, including for Quebec. Energy East would have gone right through my riding, and I supported the project in my riding just as much as I do out here. Now, I can't promise you that industry is going to come forward with another proposal to run an east-west pipeline, but I do think it would be good for the country if we could clear a corridor that is environmentally responsible, that respects First Nations, that delivers 1 million or so barrels from Western Canada to our East Coast refineries, and both for export to the world, but also to break Atlantic Canadian dependence on overseas oil imports to end the tankers. And it's funny, the Liberals are banning tankers, so-called banning tankers off the West Coast, but welcoming them in the East Coast because the oil in those tankers is foreign. So when I go to Quebec, I say, listen, we appreciate that Quebecers want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but the debate is really about where our energy comes from. And when you ask Quebecers, would they rather buy Western Canadian energy or American and overseas energy, they prefer Western energy. There's polling data to support that. So I would side with those Quebecers who believe in supporting our own sector here in Canada, as opposed to those like the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals who want us to continue to send money to Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and other overseas polluting dictatorships.
Yeah, well, a lot of signaling, as you said, private industry, well, if they felt a secure environment to invest in, there'd be a better chance they would step up. But right now, I mean, you'd be crazy to invest, to be honest, because you'd be shut down any time. The Trans Mountain Pipeline has been dragging its way for years through BC. But I want to tie it in also to showing government signals of priorities. The Coastal GasLink pipeline, I mean, it's been a victim of eco-terrorism, constant blockades, constant people arrested, rearrested. We can't even seem to keep the multi-offenders in jail there yet. Tamara Leach is incarcerated on what I say is a minor bail violation out east. It's just that the priorities of this government seem to be skewed. How can you adjust for that, I guess?
Well, listen, we need the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The problem is that we live in a country now where nothing can get done, nothing can get built, whether it's just a building permit to build a normal detached house or a major mining enterprise. You can't get a permit. I think OECD ranks us 35 out of 36 nations for the time it takes to get a building permit to do anything. A warehouse, a pipeline, a mine, a house. And so what we need to do is become the fastest place in the developed world to approve building permits for projects of all sizes. You can protect the environment and health and safety while giving fast and predictable decisions. You see countries like Singapore and Switzerland and others that they can manage to protect their people and their ecosystem without keeping entrepreneurs waiting for a decade to get a decision. And so we need to remove the regulatory gatekeepers, speed up approvals for responsible projects, and actually get things done in this country.
Likewise, there's a proposal, we're getting a lot of pressure with carbon taxes, and we covered that in a past interview with where you stand on that. But agriculturally, something surfaced. It looks like they're coming after fertilizer, as we're seeing in the Netherlands, where there's quite an uprising. Would you at least stand up for the farmers on that one? Because this could be a pending disaster as well.
It is just incredible. First of all, it's incredible that we have to be reliant on foreign countries for fertilizer, at least for nitrogen and potash, because we have our own here in Canada. But that's the first point. The second point is, I don't know how these governments think that we're going to feed ourselves without fertilizer. We're going to drastically reduce the output per acre. The irony of that is you'd need far more farmland and a far bigger footprint for agriculture if you didn't have fertilizer. The second thing is you'd have much more expensive food. And the third thing is you'd have much lower incomes for our farmers. So fertilizers give us the chance to eat more abundant, nutritious food at more affordable prices. And the alternative is a brutal poverty, particularly for the vulnerable who can't afford price increases. I think people around the world are speaking out against this gatekeeper agenda that attacks energy and food supply chains and countless other essentials that we need to survive and thrive as a species. And so I'm going to defend the ability of farmers to use environmentally responsible fertilizers that feed our people and make food affordable for every Canadian.
Well, that's great. It's just such a frustrating irony. We're in a country with such abundant resources, and we're paying some of the highest prices on earth for it, and seem to be punishing ourselves for having developed them.
Well, food prices are up 10% according to the most recent CPI data. 1 year, 10% increase. And some of the most nutritious foods are up the most. So this drives our poorest people into forced to be making bad nutritional decisions for their kids. I think I saw a poll about 6 or 7 months ago saying that 4 in 5 families had either cut the quality or quantity of their diet to adjust for food prices. This is bad for our health. It's bad for our poorest people, and we need to put an end to it. We should have affordable food. We have among the most abundant supply of arable land on earth. Let's use it to feed our people.
Well, yeah, and it's ridiculous. And we're going to see more instability, obviously, with events in Europe, unfortunately, that's ongoing, and that's sort of the breadbasket of Europe. We should be planning at least to keep the cost of living reasonable around here. I'll finish kind of with some self-interest topic, though. We've got an authoritarian government that just seems bent on controlling the media, controlling the internet, controlling expression and speech. We've got C-18, we've got C-11. What could you do to protect independent outlets so that if and when you became prime minister, I could be unfettered in criticizing you and ripping into your government when you go the wrong way?
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, no problem.
Listen, I believe in free speech, and I will repeal C-11. In fact, in the previous parliament, C-11 was called C-10. And it was the same censorship concept. CRTC would have the ability to manipulate social media algorithms to promote content favorable to the government and demote content the government doesn't want people to see, which is a form of censorship. That's why I fought hard in the last parliament to delay the passage of C-10, so it never actually made it through the Senate before Trudeau called the election. And it's why I'm fighting against C-11 now. And if, God forbid, it does become law when I'm prime minister, I will repeal it.
Okay, well, that's about all I've got for you today. I know you just had time for a quick visit. Is there more you'd like to add before we let you go here?
Well, I feel like people have lost control of their lives. Big bossy government taking people's money and telling them what to do. And that's why I'm running for prime minister, to put you back in charge of your life, make Canada the freest nation on earth. Let people make their own decisions with their bodies, with their money, with their businesses, with their families, and get the state out of the way. Government should only do what people can't do for themselves, and leave the rest to communities, to families, entrepreneurs, so that they can fulfill their potential with as little interference as possible.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'll let you get back to your Stampede campaigning, and we'll watch the leadership as it unfolds in the coming months.
Happy Stampeding to you, my friend.
I hope we can talk again down the road.
Thank you.
There you go. That was Pierre Poilievre, and yes, it was recorded, so I wasn't able to bring you viewer questions in. It's tough to get these guys pinned down for live interviews. They're always running around like chickens with their heads cut off when they're campaigning. I know people wanted to talk about, and I did cover that way back, because I had Poilievre on before for a remote interview, and that whole World Economic Forum thing. He fully denies he has anything to do with it and supports it. The question keeps coming up over and over and over again. I guess it's just a matter of whether you believe him or not. Same with UN and things like that. Those questions come up. It was, as you can see, a cagey interview. You know, it's been interesting talking to these candidates as they come in. I like it better when they come in person, because I could just get a bit more of a one-on-one feel. And Poilievre is very careful. You have to be in these campaigns. Everything, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of the legacy media. But it frustrates a bit too. I mean, it's definitely very careful, well-rehearsed answers. To be honest, and I know the commenters won't necessarily like it, but when I sat down with Jean Charest the other day, I found him a lot more directly engaging and fluid and willing to kind of go with the flow a bit with the interview and more spontaneous answers rather than just sticking to careful scripts. I'm not saying Poilievre's bad. These are just the vibes and feel I get as I talk to all of these. I don't have a membership with the Conservative Party. I don't have a membership with any party. I've got my biases. I've got people I like more than others and so on. I don't know how I would vote on this. It doesn't really matter. I'm not gonna. I just try to talk to them and get what I can out of them. I know some people say you should jump on them hard with this or this or this. And I know, and I'd like to sometimes, but then to be honest, then suddenly you don't get candidates to come on at all whatsoever. So either way, it was a good conversation. We could certainly do worse than Mr. Poilievre as a prime minister. Well, we're doing much worse than Mr. Poilievre as a prime minister. We'll see. Some of the comments. Yeah, Tyler Volstad saying, I went to the store the other day, couldn't believe the prices of stuff, much more than just a week ago. Yeah, it's flying up. Inflation is nuts. And that was one of the things, at least in talking with Poilievre, let's address that. The farms, our lunatic Trudeau and his crazed environment minister, Guilbeault, want to go after nitrogen. One of the commenters saying, I believe it's nitrogen or potassium, but we got alder trees that produce that. Like, this is naturally occurring stuff. And as Poilievre also said, if we reduce fertilizer, it means we have to expand farmland to keep up with the food because you make a bigger footprint. It's worse for the environment, but it doesn't seem to matter to these eco-lunatics. It really doesn't. And not enough people are talking about this. Not enough people nearly are talking about this. The other way, when I was talking about how do we battle with inflation besides with the Bank of Canada and besides with the government cutting spending, well, the other thing is having good, plentiful resources for us here, good domestic supply. We have loads of vast farmland. Why are we pressuring our farmers through carbon taxes and through high energy costs, and then again with potentially future fertilizer bans? We got to be making these products more affordable. I mean, people on fixed incomes are having a hell of a hard time. This inflation is hurting them. And supply management, one of my other ones, that rotten, odious system, a Soviet-style system with dairy and poultry. That was one of their area as well with Mr. Poilievre and Charest. They both said they wouldn't get rid of it. Poilievre made the case that it's too expensive because you'd have to buy out the contracts and the quotas that some producers are already dependent on. That's true. Charest basically just said he wouldn't touch it, but it doesn't mean it's too expensive to buy them out. I mean, it's sunk costs. I mean, you buy them out and you can make it back later, because right now your average consumer, your family, is paying, probably when you adjust to the last study I saw was from 2016, and it was $600 a year per family in food costs just from supply management. It's probably near $1,000 now, and those dollars mean a lot, especially for a family on a tight budget. And this is a policy that could solve that very quickly. And the politicians are afraid to touch it, I'm afraid. So yeah, you'd have to buy them out, but hey, it would pay off in the long run. New Zealand did it. Australia did it. Other countries have done it. The world doesn't end. We're the only country in the world with a system like this. I get tired of the defenders of this thing. And don't give me that crap that the American stuff isn't our quality. It is. That's a myth. Guess who sends that myth out? The dairy cartels. Yes, they love spreading those myths about, oh, the American milk isn't safe. It's not nice. Oh, BS. The problem with the American milk they're afraid of is it's affordable, as is their cheese. They're literally smuggling cheese into Canada. Either way, it is an important race and a serious race. I mean, theoretically, one of these candidates that we've been talking to is going to potentially become the Prime Minister of Canada. So we'll try and get as much feel as we can and get word to them, and maybe they understand these issues. Dash Riprock saying energy and food shouldn't even be a conversation. Yeah, how far have we sunk? I mean, these are vital things, and we've got a government that is strangling the production of both and making the costs for both higher. They're things we can't avoid. I was listening. I like talking about that when I torture myself, and I call it that when I listen to talk radio on the way into Calgary. I just got to catch the news. It's a 40-minute drive for me, and I might as well get up on the issues, and I listen to talk radio. But they're gushing about the carbon tax, and it all comes back to you. You see, don't worry about it. You spend your money on the gas, and they give it back. Well, then don't take it in the first place. That's not so complicated. And let's look at BC. They've been doing it for years. It didn't work. It doesn't reduce emissions. It's just a grab. Why give the government my money only to beg to give it back again? Kiss my ass. There's no good carbon tax. There's no justification. It's hurting us. It's hurting producers. It's hurting consumers. They won't talk about that. Cowards. Holly Midlife, commenter saying, repeal the GST like it was promised to us when it was first enacted. That's an interesting one. Yeah, it was the Liberals who lied about that. It was interesting. Sheila Copps, one of the most annoying politicians in history, She actually kind of fell on her sword over that one because she promised in her campaign, if we do not repeal it, I am going to resign. And she didn't, of course. And finally, she did step down and run for re-election. But unfortunately, she got elected again. But the GST, it's not going away, I don't think. But I mean, it's funny. There's a lot of, you listen to a lot of economists, both conservative or non, and they say consumption taxes like GST are the best taxes. They're the fairest taxes and everything. Technically, maybe. But whenever you hear people talking about we should go into them, they don't talk enough about, well, that's fine, but you got to get rid of the other taxes. If you want to make a 20% GST, but completely eliminate income tax, I'm listening. If you just want to raise the GST, go away. It's just another tax grab. It's not because it's a more efficient tax system. It's just trying to take more money. Revenue neutral, or even less so. The government has too much of our money already. They can learn to do without. The rest of us are. But let's see what else we got. I'm just watching. Yeah, rename the CTV and CSTV and CBC to CSBC from John Sampson. Okay. And I've seen a few folks, Violet, saying Roman Baber for Prime Minister. He was very impressive at the debate we had down at the Petroleum Club last Friday night. It was a good event. We had Charest and Baber, and there was only three of them, and Scott Atchison. But they all came out and socialized with a lot of people, chatted and talked. It wasn't so much a debate. It was more of a sit-down with Derek talking to them and answering some questions. And a lot of people I talked to throughout that, though. Baber is one that really came out and impressed a lot of people. They hadn't heard a lot about him, particularly in the West. If you weren't familiar with Ontario provincial politics, you wouldn't know who he is necessarily. And he's a very common sense, personable, smart guy. I got to admit, when I first heard things, that he'd gotten kicked out of Ford's caucus, provincially and things like that. He might be a little haywire. We'll see, or high-strung. And as he's gotten into this race, no, he's a level-headed, smart guy and seems pretty principled, actually. So I doubt he's got much chance of winning the leadership, but he's making a mark, and he's a young fella, as you can see. He's establishing himself. And even if he doesn't win the leadership, we're far from hearing the last out of Roman Baber. He's going to be around. And Atchison, to his credit, he's the one who really came out against supply management as a candidate. And again, he's a very long shot to win, but at least he'll be a voice in there speaking up on that stupid policy when none of the others have the courage to do it. So, we'll watch the race develop. None of these candidates are going to fix everything. We got a broken system in Canada. The system's broken. That's the problem. So, nothing shy of independence or shattering the system or bringing it to the brink of a constitutional crisis is what's going to make Canada better. We have to reopen that deal and redraft it. But in the meantime, we're going to be led by these guys, one of them or another. So, try to pick the one that'll do the least damage and the one who listens the best. And you hope that you get as good an outcome for yourself as you can. Because people get cynical, I understand. I don't get cynical so much as I just get crabby. But you're guaranteed to lose if you give up. So still pick and choose. I say that with the provincial race. I say that with the federal race. Do what you can to influence those or get involved with another party altogether. Fine. The PPC. I'm going to have Maxime Bernier in here at the end of the week, actually. I believe he's coming into the studio. Haven't heard much from them lately. They've been out there working it. And that's another alternative on the scene. The more engagement you do, the more you get out there, the better you're going to be off in general. I mean, if we give up, they win. That's a given. You're guaranteed. They still might win if you keep trying. Oh, well, at least you tried. You have to try. We're not going to get better outcomes. Let's see. Rumor from the newsroom I caught during that interview is that some of our footy fans have been upset that I knocked their sacred sport. Yes, we do have some folks that we welcome them and value them as Canadians, but they still hold these ties to that small country over on the other side of the pond that holds that sport in such great esteem, and they're upset that I criticized it. I'm not actually criticizing football all so much. I just don't want our tax dollars going into it. Come on. I love the NFL, but I wouldn't want to see 600 million tax dollars spent a year to bring the Steelers to Calgary. Hey, if they wanted to come here on their own on some sort of private merit, I would most certainly do so. But no, it's not going to happen with our tax dollars at this point. So let's see. We've also got some other news coming up. Let's see. 1/3 of office vacancies. I mentioned that to you in downtown Calgary. I talked to Poilievre about that while he was in here, and he was saying there's opportunity in Toronto. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, we'll just hang on. So, so we're talking about that. We got a lot of opportunity. He was saying downtown Calgary has a lot of vacancies, and we could potentially fill those with down to Toronto businesses. But we'll see, because as Jody Gondek has her insane $87 billion climate plan, I can't see people rushing out here to take part in that. So I see that somebody's gone and rounded up our grouchy football fan here, or soccer as the proper North American would put it.
What's wrong with you?
Where do we want to start?
Well, first of all, Canada only gets a few games. There's no doubt about that. But the economic impact is going to be huge. You talk about, okay, maybe not getting a glamorous game. Let's say you got like Mexico versus South Korea. Do you know how many Mexicans will be coming up to Vancouver to watch that game? How many South Koreans will be flying in to watch that game?
Not a hell of a lot. I mean,
No,
Mexicans
it will
aren't
be a hell of
exactly
a lot.
flush to
No,
fly
no.
to Canada.
We was at a Canada-Mexico game 10 years ago at BC Place, and the place was packed. There was like dancing in the streets, the Mexican sombreros waving. I mean, it's the most popular sport in the world. More kids play soccer in Canada than they do hockey. And with the Canadian soccer team making the World Cup since the first time in almost 40 years, the excitement in November in Qatar is going to be unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. This nation will become soccer crazy. And having that in their own country, where the Canadian team automatically gets qualified and will be playing, it's just going to be absolutely bananas.
Well, I don't deny that it's a monstrous sport. I mean, there's no getting around that. It's huge. Just because I don't watch it doesn't mean it's not important to millions and millions of people. Fair enough. 600 million clams, though. That's a lot of tax dollars for a sport. Is it really impossible to get them here for anything less than that?
Well, keep in mind, we're dealing with one of the most corrupt organizations in the world in history, FIFA, who along with the IOC are is nothing but private kingdoms. But it's, look what the Olympics did in 1988 for Calgary. That put Calgary on the map, without a doubt. So yeah, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money.
A little bit.
But look at the money the government's throwing around on worse projects than that.
Well, the CBC is a worse project, but I mean, there's things that they just don't need to spend. I mean, we can have that discussion that we're having.
Sure.
I was an aspiring ski jumper through the 80s, and the 88 Olympics were inspirational and things like that. But back then, they actually made money on that one Olympics. That's the last time it ever happened.
True.
As you said, the IOC is corrupt, FIFA is corrupt. I mean, maybe we should be examining ways, though. I can understand you're saying it's a good time and it could bring some benefit, but man, we've got to find a way to make it more affordable.
But look at the long-term benefits. Soccer is the most affordable sport for any kid to play in the country. And then the number of the success that the women had in the Olympics, the success of the women's program over the last several years has just, the number of young girls playing soccer has been a boom. And it's the same way with the Canadian team. They've soared up the rankings, and because they're doing well, people are interested. When they last went to the World Cup, they didn't even score a goal. But this time, we've got some world-class players. Alphonso Davies, the best player in the world at his position, playing for one of the top teams in the world, Bayern Munich. So, I know it means nothing to you, but it might mean something to others. But you know what? Soccer is a growing sport, so it will continue to grow.
Well, I mean, I will most certainly concede that, and it is a great sport for parents, kids. I mean, not everybody can afford the ice time, the equipment, the gear,
the insurance.
I mean, and kids can just go across the street to the park and play around with a ball and practice anytime they please, and the insurance. No, it's a great sport. I don't want to knock the sport, though I knock the fanatics as well as just that English footy thing you guys talk about.
That's because you don't understand the offside rule, right? I'll explain it to you in November when we're watching the Canadian thing.
To look forward to. Well, you've made your case. I do, as I said, concede it is a large and great sport, and there's a lot of benefits to it. I'm going to have a hard time swallowing the amount, being as to make Derek Chief.
Did you hear me yelling at you from the newsroom?
No, but I caught word from somebody that somebody was hollering over there. But it's not the first time somebody's been shouting while I do this show.
Despite the fact it's the worst show you've ever
had. Hey, don't be so mean to Poilievre.
No, that Poilievre was good. Just your soccer rant was bad.
All right. Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about this once or twice before these games come. So
Absolutely.
thank you for coming in to express your ire with me today.
My pleasure.
All right, Dave. So for a second time today, that's our news editor, Dave Naylor, who just could no longer contain himself with my most intolerant and hateful rambling about his preferred sport. But fair enough, he's made his case, and I know he's not alone. There are a lot of people that think a hell of a lot about it, and it'll be quite an event when it comes. I still, as I said, though, don't care much for the amount of money being spent, and think we could do it much more efficiently. But we allow those other voices, especially with the news editor that I got to sit across from all the time. Because if I get him really upset, then we just have a long, sour, tense day, don't we? So, what's this Gary Burnett saying? You mean you trained with Eddie the Eagle? Yeah, I volunteered at the Olympics and did some stuff. I did get to see Eddie the Eagle there, but I mean, I was just 17 at the time, which actually in ski jumping is about prime age. They don't last really long in that sport. No, I didn't train with him. I got to say, he was probably the only Olympian that I could have outjumped. Well, I'm sure I could have outjumped him, but the 80 Olympics were really something. I mean, the character of some of the people that we never saw again really like that. You know, the appearance of Eddie the Eagle and his crazed jumping, and the Jamaican bobsled team, of course, which is legendary. But it was a good time. It does leave a mark. It does bring a place into the spotlight, events like that. But just these costs, as I said, wow, they're just getting so high. I just have a difficulty. But again, just to talk about ski jumping a bit then, and fair enough, I'll tell some stories about the Calgary Olympics, some of the mistakes they made. Ski jump is a great sport too. It's actually can be cheaper than the regular alpine skiing and racing. Like I did all that as a kid as well. I grew up in Banff, as I said. It just kind of comes with the territory. I'm a terrible hockey player, can barely skate, but my skiing's pretty good. And it's a fun sport. The Canadian female jumpers team has been fantastic. The ladies team this last few years, they're doing a great job out there. But there's not nearly enough. Ski jumping used to be huge on the prairies with a lot of the settlers and farmers and Norwegians. They brought it from over there, 100 years ago. And they would build jumps in any coulee, a hill. You don't need a big mountain to build a ski jump. You just need a good size hill, and you can pull it off, and you can have a great entertainment sport going on. And for training, our coach would make us carry our boards all the way to the top of the hill on foot, for your leg exercise. Anyways, you don't need ski lifts necessarily even in all that. And one of the things Dave was talking about is how having World Cups can inspire kids to get into it more. Let's see some good Canadian successes. It'll bring more kids out, get them playing. Because again, it's a cost-effective sport for kids. It's healthy, it's fun. Absolutely. For soccer, I understand. One of the reasons ski jumping died in Canada, and it's not totally dead. There's still some ladies out there, and some others are doing everything they can, doing a good job. And there's facilities out on the West Coast. But was the Calgary jumps were terrible. They sucked. The Calgary 90, we were never even allowed to train on that thing because it was that dangerous. They built it in a spot with crosswinds where the sun beats down on it, where it's icy. If you know Calgary, it was not a good location. That's where politics came into play. It was a big battle in the 80s. And people were saying we should put it out in Canmore in the mountains or by Nikiska so that we can get the snow and avoid those winds. But others were saying we're losing way too many venues out of the city. We got to have stuff in the city. So they ended up building it here. They built the jumps for the media and for the spectators, but not for the jumpers. So what happened after that was, yes, everybody came out and used the jumps for the Olympics because the Olympics are a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But once the Olympics were gone, we couldn't get World Cup events. Usually when the Olympics have been held and you build the facilities, just like the speed skating oval had World Cup events afterwards, and Nikiska and Lake Louise, they've had World Cup downhills and slalom and stuff like that. We never had ski jumping coming over here for that because they were not going to come out and put their lives at risk on those terrible jumps in Calgary. They weren't going to do it. They would take a pass on it, the international athletes. And you didn't get that local inspiration to get those local jumpers to look up to those events, be spectators at them, feel inspired, and get out there and jump. That's part of what I talk about with government waste too, though. There's great sports and everything, but do it right. Do it right. Because the Calgary ski jumps, they're going to tear down. They just announced that, I believe, about a year ago. They're done with them. I mean, nobody's used that 90 for anything other than zip lining in years and weddings up on the top. And there's a bunch of cell towers on it. That's what it's. Nobody's jumping on the thing. It's suicidal. They did some plastic for summer training for guys on the 70, which was useful in the 50. But either way, just a ramble. But bringing World Cups can have some value. But you got to remember, a ski jumping World Cup doesn't cost you $600 million to host. Not even close. I think if they got $2 million towards one of those, they would feel that they've had a bigger grant than they've ever seen. So yeah, getting back to Calgary's vacancy rate. Speaking of bringing attention and things in, a third of our offices are vacant, but what a mess. What a mess. So we could have an opportunity to bring a bunch of people in. I was talking off the interview with Poilievre about that. But who's going to come in here when you've got such a lunatic, insane civic government who's going to have to raise taxes through the roof to pay for an $87 billion $87 billion climate plan. That isn't going to change the climate, but it'll change the climate in the sense that we're just going to be really broke. Let's see, Lenny Jean saying, my husband is snowboarding on our own hill by the house. Now he's getting retired and he's going to need a lift. Yeah, eventually as we get on, the ability to climb up there and do it yourself gets less and less. Linda Finke saying, we're a hockey family, but my granddaughter started playing soccer and is doing well. We can watch it in summer and winter. I've gotten into the game, watch hockey and soccer. Yeah, it doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be. It's a good sport. Yeah, keep calling it soccer. We're still in Canada, damn it. All right. Well, that was a good show today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to have another one tomorrow, of course. And so far, we haven't been kicked off YouTube again, so life is good. But catch us on Rumble and all the rest of those channels. Make sure to share this. It gets annoying and nagging, but for all of these things, like and share and all that, but it helps. It gets the word out. We can build that base, and we can bypass that terrible mainstream media. We're on Twitter, we're on Rumble, we're on Facebook, we're even on that weird old TikTok. Tomorrow, I got Michelle Sterling coming in with Friends of Science. We're going to talk about that huge climate plan. And of course, Michelle always has some good thoughts on that and covers a lot of ground. And Jay Hill's going to come in afterwards. And Jay, he's been on a number of times. I like getting him on because he was in Ottawa for 17 years. So he knows the ins and outs of Parliament very thoroughly. But the other part is that, when he was leading the Maverick Party, one of the executive members was Tamara Lich. He knows her quite well. I mean, I've talked to Tamara on the phone a couple of times before and things like that, but I can't pretend to know her. And it's just good to talk to somebody firsthand with this political prisoner, and that's what she is, to say, what he thinks, what she's about, and the condition she's in. Let's hope somehow that poor woman gets freed soon. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys, and I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.